Hey everyone, welcome back to this very special episode of On Purpose. Thanks to our partners at BetterHelp for this episode. Today I'm joined with Jesus Joe, licensed therapist and head of clinical operations at BetterHelp. Hey everyone, welcome back to On Purpose. Thank you so much for coming back to listen to today's episode. I'm so grateful that you trust me. I'm so grateful that you value your time here with On Purpose so much. And I want you to know that I deeply value each and every one of you that make time in your days, in your weeks to connect here. And as you know, I'm always trying to come up with new ideas, creative ways of helping you learn about your journey towards happiness, towards healing, and towards health. And one of the ways I like to do that is I love experiments. I always have. And I like doing things myself and putting myself in uncomfortable positions. And so one of the series that we started off here was me going to therapy and doing a therapy session as an episode, as a way to show you how accessible it is, how simple it is, how useful it can be, and also for you to get to know me better as well. I really want to be able to be more open with you. And sometimes when I'm doing a 4-minute interview on TV, or even if I do a podcast episode with someone else, the conversation can seem very specific to what I'm talking about, but not necessarily specific to me. So this is for all of you who would like to know a bit more about me, learn a bit more about me and how I ended up the way I did, but also encouraging the conversation of how did you get to where you are today? What is it about your life that you can learn from or grow from and can serve you differently if you thought about it differently? So I want to give a big thanks to our incredible partners at BetterHelp for this episode, our incredible therapist, Jesus, who's here with me today again. You've seen her in 3 episodes before this, and this is our 4th episode in this series. So make sure you go back and listen to the other 3 if you haven't already. Jesus, thank you so much for doing this again.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's always great to be with you. And I feel like after our first therapy session, I feel it's amazing how you build a relationship with someone so quickly because you're so vulnerable with someone. How do you as a therapist monitor that relationship building? Because almost like as a patient, I'm like, oh God, this person's like kind of like knows everything about me now, more than what some of my friends may know about me, not my closest friends, but some friends. And people start feeling close to their therapist because of vulnerability. What's the professional line and how do you maintain that? Because I can imagine a lot of people start trusting you deeply.
Yeah, I don't know if you already know, but this is like a focal point in the education of therapists and continuing education. This thing you're talking about, your clients begin to feel close to you. Your clients will also love you. Some of your clients will fall in love with you. Sometimes you're the first person or one of the only people that gives them the experience of being seen without criticism and judgment, which is like very rare in today's modern world when we're trying to connect with people. So managing this relationship that becomes very intimate is really important to protect you, to protect the client. So people will hear of things like the code of ethics, and these exist to protect the public, right? It's like therapists gain a lot of power in this relationship. I know so much about you, but you don't really know anything about me. And I could use that with my clients to a huge advantage. So that is very dangerous, I think. And so these codes of ethics ensure that we are protecting our clients. We're managing our feelings about our clients, the feelings that our clients develop about us. It has a word, it's called transference. And the feelings that I develop for you, that's countertransference. And these are things that we have to process and things that therapists are encouraged to go to therapy for, consult with other people throughout their practice in order to keep things healthy, in order to keep things in line with the goal, which is to help you meet your ambitions and your goals. It's not about anything to do with what my emotional intentions or my ego is. But it is something that we are meant to be mindful to manage, because there are times where when you're not managing it, it turns into a very messy situation. Yeah. And you're like, folks have heard of these things. People can lose their license because they've taken advantage of a client and entered a very personal relationship, which is a huge no-no. So for me, it's like just knowing and understanding your clients will develop very strong feelings about and towards you, and continuing to be the safe person that's responsible for establishing healthy boundaries and making it very clear, like, what is this relationship?
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. I love that. All right, well, let's dive in. Over to you again. I will hand over my host hat to you to get into the zone.
So that's what I kind of am interested in talking about today with you is relationships. So I don't know what you're willing to share about that, but can you tell me about what being in relationship means to you and like what is important about humans doing that?
I think having a relationship with anyone is very sacred if you're both making time, sharing energy, whether it's my wife, whether it's one of my best friends, whether it's a team member. I think about relationships as an exchange of energy, and I want that energy that is created and exchanged to be positive and healthy for both people. I also think about it as a safe space, and hence I call it sacred. It's a safe space where you feel trusted, where you feel someone wants to try to understand, and where you feel that your openness will not be used against you or will not be taken advantage of. And beyond all of that, there's a sense of knowing. And when I say knowing, I don't mean someone's a mind reader and they know what you're thinking about. It's that as you start to talk to that person, they know what you mean, and because they've had so many experiences with you. That's how I see relationships today. But I think when I was growing up, I think I was so in love with the idea of love that I just wanted to be in love. And I think a lot of that came from just watching too many bad movies. I think a lot of my initial ideas on love were based on terrible movies that you see as a kid, whether it's American Pie, Road Trip, tons of Bollywood movies too, that Bollywood movies almost portray this really glamorous view of love. And I think Hollywood movies at the time portrayed a very lusty view of love. And you kind of get caught somewhere in between of infatuation, attraction, and then this glamorized version of love is where I think I ended up. And so to me, I was always wanting to be in love without knowing what it was, without knowing what it required from the other person. I just wanted to give love and be loving and have love. And I think that led to a lot of issues growing up when I first started dating, because when I first started dating, I was around 14 years old. And I was kind of like that person who just went above and beyond all the time with anyone, whether I just met them or whether I'd known them for a while. And that was quite new for, I guess, the girls that I was dating as well. We were all fairly young. And so whether we were in our first relationships or our second, to have someone who was that overly giving was quite, people appreciated it, people liked it. But I realized that I was doing it, and I realized this afterwards, I was doing it because I just wanted them to like me. It's not that I actually, beyond being attracted to them or beyond being infatuated with them or whatever it may have been, I don't think I actually knew anything about them. But I liked the idea of someone that I felt attracted to liking me and validating me and thinking I was a good person and thinking that I was special and thinking that I was important.
When your mind is developing, this means your worldview is developing, which will later turn into your personal philosophy. So many things can impact it. So I'm not saying that this is how people should live their lives, but personally, I have witnessed so much and observed how detrimental it is to engage in many things as a developing young mind, whether that's substance, cannabis, alcohol, sex, these kinds of things, which are highly emotionally charged, when you don't even understand what's happening to you when your state of mind is being altered. It's very difficult to reconcile that as an adult. It totally impacts you. And you see it now, there's so much research that shows kids that do these things. I'm not saying it's caused, but there's a lot more prevalence of mental health issues for kids that engage in these things versus kids that don't.
So what we're hearing is that it's guaranteed that if you're in relationships in your teens, you're going to go through a ton of pain either way. We're going to make mistakes. It's likely that we're going to make mistakes. And some of those mistakes become really damaging and traumatic long term.
Stay with you forever.
I remember that. So my parents never wanted me to have a relationship until I was ideally, they would never have wanted me to have a relationship until I was married. And so I never told my parents when I was dating. Like my parents have no idea. If my parents listen to the episode, they have no idea that I ever had a girlfriend. They probably have some idea now, but like they would never have known that I was dating at 14.
Yeah.
And it became so much more attractive to me to want to date because my parents didn't want me to date. And then obviously in culture, you don't want to be a loser again if you don't date. And so, yeah, it's hard because I agree with you. I think you wouldn't make as much mistakes. You wouldn't learn as much. It's complicated. But anyway,
it is complicated. And parents, sometimes they're not conscious of why they're even setting that rule.
Totally.
But if they could articulate it, and if a 14-year-old could understand it, it's like we're saying this out of the wisdom of knowing that you are still absorbing the world, and we want you to absorb it in a way that's inviting, welcoming, loving, something that you can feel is safe. But they don't always like know how to say that.
No, 14, and
it's
no
just like
14-year-old
no dating until you get married.
Yeah, so powerful. Thank you for that. I love that.
You mentioned that there's like a difference in how you view relationships then versus now. Like, can you tell me, this is a big question, but can you tell me like what happened in the in-between? Like, how did you get to this place now of how you view relationships?
Well, lots of failed relationships, like lots of heartbreak. What used to happen was I would over love someone. Again, I'm not sure it was love, but I would over give. And when someone couldn't keep up with my rate of giving, I would walk away.
You're looking for that.
I was looking for it back. Yeah, exactly. I was like, well, I'm loving you. And it was almost like I was setting the standard of how much love I was going to give. And then if they didn't match my standard, which I had made up anyway, they never even asked for it, then I would be upset. And that was extremely unhealthy. Now I see that because you end up feeling like the victim and you end up feeling like they wronged you. When in fact you set a false standard and hurt that person because that person was feeling overly loved by you, and then the next thing you know, you walked away and it's all over. And they're wondering what went wrong there too. And so I think there was a lot of failed relationships where, and again, I'm not saying that everyone I dated was perfect and that I messed up in that way. There was, there's a lot of mutual responsibility, but I think what happened in between was I became a monk. Like that's the through line of so much of my life, where it's like for 3 years, I didn't date. I was celibate for 3 years. You don't really interact with women when you're a monk. And I think a part of the reason why I did that was because I've obviously simplified some of my experience of how I was, but I also got to a place where I couldn't keep a healthy relationship. Like I didn't, a long-term relationship. There was something that would go wrong. And I was just sick of relationships. I was like, I just don't want to put in this work. For what reason? Like, why am I putting in all this work to try and make this thing work with very little benefit? And I'd rather go and work on myself and help the world or whatever it may have been at the time, which we've talked about previously. And so I think there was a part of me that was just feeling like I don't know how to get a relationship right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think what happened in between was spending 3 years on my own allowed me to re-clarify and re-identify what love was to me, not what love was to my family or in the movies or to some of the people I'd met, but what was love to me? What kind of relationship did I want? And obviously, like living as a monk, even though you're not dating, you develop a lot of good skills for dating, like patience and commitment and discipline and understanding and listening and mindfulness. And so there's so many great skills that you gain that then become very useful when you start dating. And so then since I left the monastery, the only person I've ever dated is my wife. And, we're all constantly working on things even today, but I definitely feel a lot more stability with her than I've felt before, and a lot more commitment and love there than I've felt before. And obviously that's a lot to do with her as well. That's not just me. But yeah, I think that's what changed it.
Becoming a monk.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, as a monk, in the 3 years you were a monk, and many people stay monks until they leave this earth, right? And I'm understanding that you're saying monks don't date. Monks are celibate. So can you refresh my memory why that is? And it's not just in one kind of monk, right? You see this across cultural different monkness.
Yeah.
So why is that? Can you remind me?
I mean, there's many different reasons, and I can't speak for anyone beyond my tradition, obviously. But I would say that the number one reason is to create a sense of focus and aligned energy. So if we all believe that we have a certain amount of energy, and the more things we add to that, the more it takes away our energy in different directions. Now, being celibate or getting into a relationship is one of those, but it's the same as having a career. As a monk, you don't have a job, right? And so it's the same reasoning where it's like, well, what if all of your energy was placed in self-mastery and self-realization, and you didn't use your energy for anything else?
Or anyone else.
Would you not have the opportunity to go deep into the self? And so it's not about women or celibacy, or like, it's not about the external idea of like, some people are like, oh, well, money's bad and women are bad and that's where you stay. And it's like, well, no, it's got nothing to do with that. It's not like you don't have a job because money's bad, or you don't have a partner because, you know, a certain gender is bad. It's the idea that how could you limit all your distractions, or how could you limit all your focuses and energy to the pursuit of self-realization? And anything above the pursuit of self-realization is seen as unimportant at that stage of life. And I think there's beauty in that. I think when I think about getting 3 years of my life to have an exclusive focus on self-realization, I would say it works. And I think about this often. I'm like, when did people ever in their lives have 3 days for self-realization, let alone 3 weeks, 3 months, or 3 years? And so I think it worked. I think it was true. I do believe that carving out exclusive time for yourself and self-realization is a beautiful commitment to yourself. And you don't have to go and become a monk to do it. I think therapy is one way to do it, and is a great way to do that. Every week you're carving out an hour or 2 hours for yourself and understanding yourself. And so over years that will add up. And so I think that the idea or the concept, you don't have to become a monk to do it, but the idea and the concept of investing your energy exclusively in self-realization is a healthy one.
Thank you. Thank you for taking that detour, because, you know, sometimes clients may have this idea that therapists know everything about all kinds of people. So sometimes I may ask you to remind me why something is the way it was in some piece of your life, because it helps me understand you better as I seek to understand you better, as I accompany you through whatever it is that you're trying to explore about yourself. So I really appreciate you taking the time to help me understand that.
Yeah, of course.
And in all of that, I'm hearing like becoming a monk, which we talked about previously, a large part of it was maybe you couldn't articulate it before you became one, but after this journey, it was about being able to validate yourself.
Yes.
And it sounds like all your early relationships, you're really seeking this validation from someone else.
Yeah, it was validation because I guess I didn't like myself. It was the idea of, how do you buy someone's love? Like, is it a fancy gift? Is it a posh restaurant? Is it me overdoing it for their birthday when we barely know each other? Like, what am I overcompensating for? And I'm overcompensating for the fact that I'm not sure I think I'm worthy, or I'm not sure that I like myself enough, and I'm hoping that this will win that person over, and then we'll have that romantic love in the movies. And that was the only way to get through to them, was to do these grand gestures. I've always been someone who considers themselves to be someone, and I still to this day love grand gestures, and I've married someone who doesn't appreciate grand gestures. And it took me ages to understand that. And I think my wife, because I do love her deeper than that, was one of the few people who's been able to teach me that grand gestures don't equal love, or are not the only way to show love, because she didn't receive them with the glorification and adulation of, oh, you're amazing. She kind of received them as like, well, I didn't really want this, or this doesn't really make me happy. And in my head, when we first started dating, it was like, well, you're weird. It's like, how can you not be happy? Look how incredible I am. only to realize that, again, it was still, so even after being even in our early years of dating with me and my wife, I still think I was, and even till this day, I think that is so deep rooted, that idea of love is grand gestures, love is this big thing, the idea of overgiving, like I think it's so deep rooted. It takes a long time to be aware, let go, be conscious. It doesn't just disappear.
Right. And sometimes for some people, love is grand gestures,
Totally.
right? And you're kind of touching on something that a lot of people would benefit from reminding themselves of. We, or I, as an individual, love and express love in a certain way, and I feel love and I receive love in a certain way. It's pretty unlikely that you will end up with someone that speaks love and receives love in the exact way that you do.
Totally.
So it's like being in this long-term relationship. It sounds like you and your wife have navigated, how can I express my love to her in a way that she will receive it? Because a lot of people are like, well, this is how I would like for someone to love me. So if I keep doing that to her, she's going to like it because I would like it.
Yeah.
I think we're learning that that is not love. Love is learning to express it in the way that your partner receives it.
And I also realized that for me, the way I like to receive love and give love is how my mom gave me love.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mom would, and we've talked about my mom before, my mom would always save up to buy me the one big gift I wanted every year for my birthday. And we didn't have a lot growing up, so she would save up and she knew what I wanted, and she always knew what I wanted. I didn't even have to tell her, she just knew. And then on my birthday, I'd unwrap this gift and it would be exactly the thing that I wanted. And so that had been how I'd been loved. My mom did give me time and we did have beautiful experiences, but I remember gifts being a big thing in my home. And then when I married my wife, it's like gifts are like not important in her home. Like they spend quality time with each other, and her dad would take the day off on her birthday and they'd go out or whatever it may be. And so to me, I couldn't get my head around how gifts couldn't be important to someone, because I was just like, gifts are the best thing in the world. Like, and it took me a long time to also realize, and even till this day, like one of the members of my team bought me a gift for my birthday. My birthday was a couple of months ago. And she found something that I didn't need, I didn't want, but it was like a felt of understanding. And it was a new pair of shoes that were really cool, and they were this cool collab, and they were a bit rare. And I was like, this person understands me so well. And it's a long time since I've received a gift that felt that way. And it wasn't because of how much it cost. It wasn't grand because it was big or expensive. It was grand because it was so thought through. Like, it was the right pair of shoes. And I was like, that was beautiful. And then a few years ago, I had a person in my life send me a Life magazine, like the old ones that I don't think are in print anymore. And it was signed by the Dalai Lama.
Oh.
And they sent that to me as a gift. And I was like, this is the best gift ever. Like, this person understands me. And so I started to realize that even my love for gifts wasn't because I wanted something. It was because a gift made me feel understood, right? It was, that's what I was looking for, was a sense of you know me.
The sense you got when your mom gave you that gift, that she knew what you wanted and needed, and you didn't even have to say it.
Yeah.
She just like could see into you.
Yeah. Only realizing that that's very hard to do. and putting that pressure on my wife was not smart, because it takes a while for people to get to know you. And, it takes a while for people to know what kind of gifts you want. And also, she was learning at the same time. She was learning that I needed gifts, because in her eyes, spending good time with each other was the gift. And in my head, I was like, no, like, the gift's the gift and time together is not the gift. And so it's really interesting when two people are learning something at the same time. And it's hard because when you're both learning the same thing at the same time, you're just like, knocking against each other.
Yeah, finding that person, finding your person, whether that's like your person of the season or your person for the rest of your life, you're bringing together two most likely very different families of origin. And it's like your world view is shaped by the people that raise you. And so you're touching on all these things. This is the way that I received love from my mom. So this is the way that as a small child becomes deeply ingrained in me, how people are supposed to receive it too. Yeah. And it sounds like she had a different experience. And like you said, navigating and learning these things at the same time, much more difficult than when you have like an apprentice and somebody mentoring them. Somebody knows something, but oftentimes in relationships, you're realizing together like, I don't actually know anything, and neither do you. Yeah. But we're trying to figure that out while we're getting to know each other.
Yeah.
All with this like deep desire and need to be seen. That's so much of being loved.
Yeah. Yeah. And I found that I would often overlove my wife and then make her feel guilty for not loving me the same.
Keeping tabs.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example of overloving?
I would do something spontaneous, like plan a weekend activity or whatever it may be. But then if she doesn't plan